Oh my god. I have tried to start this video 8 or 9 times now, but I'm currently looking after 3 cats, and at some point there's always noise. There's always a cat doing something. Welcome to the end of 2021. We made it. Well done us. I have 2 videos for you, and this is the first one. I've decided to do 2 end-of-year lists. Best translated books of 2021 and best English language books of 2021. A few caveats. Number 1, you're probably going to see and or hear some cats in this video. Number 2, I'm in a different space. I'm in the Netherlands right now, spending Christmas here, so different room. Number 3, that means I don't have any of these books with me. So I'm kind of going off memory completely. I won't be able to hold them up and show you. Luckily, Future Will, who is just a wonderful editor, is going to put all of these books in for me. Oh, you're too kind. Your hair looks amazing today. Thank you. I like your t-shirt. And my final caveat is that all of these books came out this year in 2021. It's really echoey in here. Is it echoey? Let me know in the comments. Welcome to the best translated books of 2021. Let's go. Number 10 is Lemon by Kwon Yo-sun. This is a Korean novel translated into English by Janet Hong. I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed how short it was. It's a slender little thing, and it brilliantly twists the murder mystery idea. It begins as a kind of murder mystery. It begins with a boy being interrogated by the police for maybe being the culprit. But it's not really about that. The murder mystery part of this murder mystery is not important. It's really a literary novel about grief and about people and how they live beyond death, how they live after losing someone, how they continue on and how that death changes them and transforms their life forever. In Lemon, you have a young girl who is mysteriously killed. There are 2 culprits, 2 boys, 1 rich, 1 poor. But really the story is mostly about the victim's sister, who was a little younger, and now we find her around the same age that her sister was when she died. And this sister is not coping well. It's a fascinating examination of grief and death and misery, but it's not too miserable. It still has that murder mystery feel that allows it a little lightness. Number 9 is Magma by Thora Hjörleifsdóttir, translated from Icelandic into English by Meg Matic/Matic, I'm not sure. Magma is another pretty difficult novel to read, but it's another one that I really enjoyed. Magma is an Icelandic novel that very, very poignantly and in a very raw way explores toxic masculinity. It is from the perspective of a, I think, nameless young woman who is in a very toxic relationship. It is a book that explores toxic masculinity as well as abuse in a lot of different ways. It doesn't look at these things on a surface level. It looks at the more micro kinds of abuse, the ways in which abuse can not even look like abuse, but it still is. Magma is tough. It is a very, very raw and angry feminist novel, and I loved it for that reason alone, but I also loved it just for how cleverly it explores the relationships between women and the toxic men in their lives. There are a lot of great feminist novels that explore toxic masculinity, but Magma does it in a very raw and visceral way. It's also written in very small vignettes, if I remember rightly. The chapters are tiny, and it's written kind of piecemeal. It's tough, it's very poignant, and it's very well executed. Magma's not fun, but it's definitely one of the best books that I read this year. Number 8 is another Korean novel, My Brilliant Life by Aran Kim. I read this book at the start of the year. I actually think it was my first review. I read this right back in January and I have not forgotten it at all. It's translated from Korean by Chi Young Kim and it is a stunning little novel. My Brilliant Life is told from the perspective of a young boy who has an aging disease. He's approaching his 16th birthday, and he's not going to live much beyond that. And what he's chosen to do with the time that he has left is to compile a notebook, a scrapbook, of all of the things that his parents have told him about his childhood, about their lives, their romance, their own childhoods. He is gifting them this perfect scrapbook of memories and notes and stories that comprises their whole brilliant life together as a family. And so we then go back in time to the beginning of this notebook, and our protagonist is telling us about how his parents met. We get to see their blossoming young teenage romance and the mistakes that they made, and how they got pregnant earlier than they should have, and their life was difficult, and then they had a child who has a degenerative disease, but they always made the best of it, and they were always good parents, and they were always a good family. It's a very sad book, but it's also a very happy book. It is truly bittersweet, and it has really stayed with me. Oh my god, another Korean book. Fantastic. Love in the Big City. This is number 7. Love in the Big City is written by Sang-Yong Park, and it's translated by Anton He. Hi, Anton. Love in the Big City is a beautiful, beautiful queer Korean novel. It came out fairly recently, and I think about it almost every single day. Love in the Big City is a semi-autobiographical novel that tells the story of a young man from his late teens university years up through his mid-20s, and how he enjoys his life as a young gay man in Korea. It begins with a very, very tight-knit friendship between him and a young girl, and how they're enjoying their life together. They're enjoying living together, going to college together, they enjoy sleeping around, they enjoy living in a very hedonistic way. They're partying, they're going to clubs, they're having sex, they're enjoying their youth. And then she gets married fairly young and kind of grows up. And then it moves into how he's going to live the rest of his life. Without someone to kind of party with, he has to make that choice. Is he going to continue living hedonistically? Is he going to find love, find romance? What's he going to do for work? And we just kind of follow his life out of university, through his 2 mandatory military years, and into his 20s. Love in the Big City is a snapshot of a young man's life, a young gay man growing up in Seoul, and it's full of brightness and vitality, but also difficult moments and sadness. It's life. It really is life. It is about love in the big city and life in the big city, and it's stunning. Number 6 is Brickmakers by Selva Almada, translated from Spanish into English by Annie McDermott. Selva Almada is one of my favourite novelists. She is my favourite Argentinian novelist, my favourite Latin American novelist, my favourite Spanish language novelist. I love the works of Selva Almada so much, and Brickmakers is the second book in what is called her trilogy of men. I was lucky enough, about a week ago, to interview Selva Almada and Annie McDermott. I was so glad and so grateful that I got to do something like this. I got to meet one of my absolute literary heroes, and I am still reeling from it, honestly. We talked a lot about Brickmakers, and that is my number 6 book of this year. Brickmakers is another really, really tough literary novel. It's another feminist novel, and it's another novel looking at toxic masculinity. Books like this are very, very important to me. But even if they weren't, Brickmakers is still a very, very intense, powerful, exciting, thrilling, horrible novel, and I adore it. Brickmakers begins in media res with 2 boys dying on the ground at night in an empty theme park. The 2 of them have stabbed each other, and they are bleeding out. The rest of the novel is told very much out of order as we explore the lives of these 2 boys' fathers and how these 2 boys inherited toxic masculine traits. This is a book about inherited abuse, inherited masculinity, inherited aggression, and how fathers raise their sons, or don't. It's a book very much about raw, difficult rural landscapes and the people that exist within them. It's a book about a lot of things. You can go watch my review. But Brickmakers is powerful stuff. And the way that the narrative is told in this jumbled up, out of order kind of way adds layers of content and context to it as it goes. I've talked so much about Brickmakers. I did a review, I mentioned it in a roundup, and then I interviewed Selva Almada, so this book is very much in my blood right now, and I really, really adore it. It's not an easy book, but it's a very satisfying one in a weird way. My number 5 book of 2021, at least in translation, is The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez. This should have been one of my caveats. I have included short story collections in this, but no non-fiction. I love short story collections, and I've got a few on this list. This is another book from Argentina. The Dangers of Smoking in Bed is a collection of strange, gothic stories about ghosts and witches and folklore and curses and superstition. It's a lot of fun. I love the gothic genre, and this is a gothic collection of stories. One of those stories is the titular The Dangers of Smoking in Bed. The stories in this collection explore a lot of different aspects of the gothic and the supernatural, and most of these stories can be viewed through a relatively feminist lens. A lot of the protagonists are women and girls, a lot of the antagonists are, as I said, witches, or women who use curses or believe in curses. There's a focus on the women of Buenos Aires, and actually the city itself, Buenos Aires, is a character. Every story in this is set in Buenos Aires, or at least begins there, and maybe moves out to another town, or one of them, I think, they go to Barcelona? Yeah, I'm sure one of the stories they fly to Barcelona. Anyway, Buenos Aires is front and center in this book, and it is very much a character in and of itself. And I love that character, the way that the city and its people and its neighborhoods, the way that it is portrayed really shows the variety within the city. Number 4. This is Heaven by Mieko Kawakami. Mieko Kawakami is my favorite Japanese author, and last year in 2020 she wrote my favorite book of the year, Breasts and Eggs, translated by Sam Bett and David Boyd. This year we have Heaven, again translated by Sam Bett and David Boyd. This did not make my number 1, but it has probably stuck with me more than any other book on this list, partly because I got to see a live adaptation stage performance thing of it fairly recently, but also just because of how philosophically strained and awful it is. Heaven, I think, was Kawakami's first novel, but it is her latest translated into English. I think that's right. Either way, Heaven is the story of a young boy at school being mercilessly bullied. And at the very beginning, he makes friends with a girl who is also being bullied, and the two of them have found companionship and camaraderie in one another. As the book goes on, their relationship gets explored more and more, as does our protagonist's relationship to the bullies who are just beating the shit out of him. It's a horrible, horrible book. And there is a moment in the midpoint where our protagonist has a conversation with one of his bullies. And I think from what I saw in the comments in my video, and also just from talking to other people who've read it, friends who've read it, it's this conversation that sticks with all of us. Right at the midpoint of this novel, our protagonist chats with one of his bullies about why they do what they do. And it is so hard to read, and it is really powerful. I read it multiple times, and I saw it on the stage as well, and just read it. The way that Kawakami is exploring the very nature of bullying is so fascinating, and giving attention to the bullied and the bullies. And as someone who's bullied in school, it hit me really, really hard. It made me cry, and it's not an easy book. I don't think any of the books on this list are easy, but Heaven is particularly tough to read for a lot of people. A lot of people don't like it for that reason. A lot of people can barely finish it or not finish it at all. But it really is a stunning, stunning novel. Just be warned if you haven't read it yet. It's hard. Number 3 is another short story collection, this one from Korea, and this is Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung, translated by Anton He, the only translator to make this list twice. Hi Anton again. Cursed Bunny is a wonderful, weird, again, kind of gothic, creepy, horror collection of short stories. Or at least it is at first. The first 3 or 4 stories in this collection, I think there are 10 total, the first few are really, really horrible. One of them is a pure, terrifying ghost story set at night on an abandoned road. Another one is about a cursed object, the titular Cursed Bunny. And then 2 others are about really gruesome body horror. They are nasty and horrible. The first 2 stories in this collection really are gross. They're nasty and icky, and if you don't like this kind of thing, then you're not going to finish the collection, but I urge you to, because they're not all like that. There is one science fiction story. There is one that is fantasy, but it's kind of like a fable or a fairy tale. And then the final story in the collection is a ghost story, but it's not scary. It has ghosts in it, but it is more an exploration of love and romance and history. It's amazing. Her imagination and her knowledge and her ability to learn and teach and write is all so really wonderful. Cursed Bunny is a stunning collection, and I urge everyone to go out and read it now if you haven't already. Honford Star published it, and you should give them your support. The cover design, everything. Cursed Bunny is beautiful. Well, it's not beautiful. It's not beautiful at all, but it's beautiful. Number 2 is Things Remembered and Things Forgotten by Kyoko Nakajima. This was co-translated by Ginny Tapley Takimori and Ian MacDonald. The stories in this collection, again, I think there are 10, are stunning. If you like short story collections, you're probably very aware that they're not all of equal quality. If you go back to a short story collection, you're going to have the urge to read some stories more than others. There are some that you might never read again, others that you read multiple times. As a huge short story fanatic, this has happened to me so much. But with Things Remembered and Things Forgotten, I cannot pick a favorite. This is such a solid book. Every story in this collection is gold. It's a book with a rough overall theme of time and memory. Most of the stories in this collection are set somewhere in the 20th century, and a lot of them explore the way that Japan as a country has changed, but also how people change over time as well. A lot of the stories deal with different generations, the relationship between grandparents, parents, children, grandchildren. They look at generational progress, they look at the progress of technology and time. There's a lot of time in this book, and it allows you to explore things in a variety of different ways. Time as a theme is very broad, and so here we have marriages and families, friends losing touch. Some of the stories have real sudden twists in them that you don't see coming, but they are all stories about love and relationships and how time changes those things. I love the stories in this collection so much. It is my favourite short story collection of this year. Although I have to be honest, this and Cursed Bunny really do kind of overlap, but I think this one just about wins out. It's beautifully written, it is full of heart and soul and love and friendship and family. I can't say enough good stuff about it. It's mostly heartwarming and beautiful. My number 1 book in translation of 2021 really surprised me. As I was compiling the list, I put this one in the list. I sort of made 10 books at random, and then I thought, right, I'll shuffle them now into some kind of order. And this one just kept moving up to the top, almost by itself, like I wasn't doing it, because I really didn't expect it. I thought, yeah, this is going to be in my top 10. And then just kept going up, and I thought, this is my favourite book in translation of 2021. Huh! I'm as shocked as you are. This is Whisper by Chang Yu Ko, translated from Chinese into English by Roddy Flagg. This is a Taiwanese novel, and it is terrifying and brilliant and fantastic and wonderful, and I can't throw enough adjectives at it. I really didn't expect Whisper to be my number 1, but I've said several times in this video that there are certain books that have just stuck with me, and no book left a greater impact on me than this one. But that impact was not pleasant. Whisper is a horror novel. It is gruesome and terrifying and twisted and strange, and I loved every second of it. Not a lot of people are going to agree with me. I'm sure a lot of people are very confused by this choice, but I love horror. I love being terrified, and I love pretty much every kind of horror. Ghosts and the supernatural, psychological horror, creeping, slow dread that you wouldn't even really call horror, but it is, and gruesome, disgusting, nasty body horror with guts and blood everywhere. I love every kind of horror. I really do. And Whisper, at some point in its chronology, experiences all these different kinds of horror. There is creeping dread. There are moments of gross body horror. And it really is scary. That's the other reason it's on this list, is that it's truly a horror novel that really frightened me. I had nightmares after I read it. Whisper is really horrifying, and it also utilizes Chinese, Taiwanese, East Asian culture, traditions, superstitions, folklore. All of these things are present. It explores the very turbulent and difficult relationship between Taiwan and Japan. The Japanese Empire pre-World War II occupied Taiwan, And since then, their relationship has been a very interesting one. And the book explores that. The book explores Japan. It explores mainland China. There is politics in it. It also has a very, very unlikable, disgraceful protagonist. And I love him. He's great. It begins with him and his wife and how they treat each other, and it's not fun. And then his wife dies. She's killed by a ghost. And now that ghost is following him and trying to kill him, maybe. And he has to investigate. And this is how history and interpolitical geographical relationships start to feature into it as well. And there's a pretty big cast of characters, and none of them are nice people, for the most part. It's a lot of things. Whisper is pure genius as horror, as genre fiction, as literary fiction goes. I love it. I really do. Whisper is a wonderful, wonderful novel. It is my favourite book in translation of 2021. Please check it out. Roddy Flagg did an astonishing job translating it. Honford Star published it, and again, I always ask people to support them as a publisher. I'm so glad that I read this wonderful, wonderful Taiwanese novel. Oh, Whisper's great. There you have it. That is my top 10 books in translation of 2021. As you can see, I have a particular liking for books from Japan, Taiwan, Korea, Argentina, Iceland. Is that it? And I read a lot of books from those places. Anyway, those are my top 10. Give me your favourite books in translation of 2021. Tell me if you agree with any of these, if you think any of them are ridiculous. Be mean, I don't care. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And look out for my next video, which will be my favourite books that were not translated into English, but written in English of 2021. Subscribe for books.